Yo, what's going on, guys? Your boy Fanatic and I am back with another video. So today is our last day of the 2 weeks of the SEC. It's been so fun doing these videos. I'm really taking a deep dive into each SEC team. Really helps me out to make predictions coming up in the 2019 season. And also, it's just really fun to do these. I'm sorry this video is coming out kind of late today. Usually I post one video kind of in the morning or at noontime, then one video around 10 or 11 at night. This one's probably coming out around dinner time. I do have swimmer's ear, which is unfortunate to say the least. But what can you do? I mean, that's life. So Georgia has a very interesting schedule. They have one of the most intriguing games of the year against Notre Dame. And they also have, of course, Auburn, Florida, you know, the usual teams that they face every year. So will they reach their full potential and finally get over the hump and win the national championship? Or will they kind of take a step back and maybe have another team beat them like Florida or Texas A&M or Auburn? Let's figure this out. So it's really rare to see an SEC on SEC matchup to start off the season, but that's exactly what Georgia has here, as they are going up against the Vanderbilt Commodores. I think Vanderbilt's going to come out of this game fired up, ready to compete. And I think for the first half, Georgia will be winning, but probably only by like 10 points or so. Vanderbilt will be able to compete for one half, and then I think Georgia will just kind of run away with the victory in the second half. Georgia making a statement that they are the better team than Vanderbilt, and that just because they've had some losses in the offseason, like Jeremiah Holloman, they recently lost Jeremiah Holloman, I think, a couple days ago. I think on Sunday, I'm pretty sure. But they are still dominant despite all those rough losses. So Georgia, after an SEC matchup against Vanderbilt, has more of a cupcake game against Murray State. I think Georgia's going to pretty much handle Murray State, obviously. It's Georgia's season home opener. They're going to be fired up. They're going to come out of the gates quickly and put this game to rest within like a quarter and a half. So I think this will be a pretty much beatdown. Georgia will win 58-7, starting off the year 2-0. So Georgia has another kind of warm-up game against Arkansas State for their big game against Notre Dame. I think they might slightly overlook Arkansas State, and they might get off to kind of a slow start. It might be a close game for like a quarter and a half or so, or a quarter and a quarter. Not 2 quarters, but a quarter and half of another quarter. Sorry, I didn't say that very well. But I think it'll be a 42-14 victory for Georgia. Georgia will snap back into place in the second half and run all over Arkansas State, building up momentum to face the big game, Notre Dame. So in one of the most intriguing games of the year, especially for Georgia, it's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, a rematch from 2 years ago. I believe Georgia won that game 19-17. That was Jake Fromm's first start, actually, for Georgia. This is Jake Fromm's kind of coming out party when everybody figured out that he was going to be great for Georgia. And he did turn out to be great for Georgia, obviously. So this is a traditional game. All the 80-year-olds and all the 8-year-olds will be watching this. It appeals to everybody. It's going to be like one of the hardest tickets to get, especially in Athens, for probably 5 years, and probably the next 10 years to pass. This is a huge game, a huge tradition game, and also a lot of playoff implications riding on this game. I think the loser of this game will miss the playoffs. So who wins between Georgia and Notre Dame, 2 physical squads? I think this would be kind of a low-scoring game for the first half, and the offenses might get rolling a little bit in the second half. I think this game will come down to one final drive, but I think the Georgia defense will hold off the Notre Dame offense to win 23-17. I don't think Notre Dame is quite good enough as Georgia. They can't recruit as well as Georgia. And I think the coaching's a little bit better at Georgia, and it's in Athens. So all those things combined to give Georgia the slight edge over Notre Dame. So we head down to Knoxville. Last time we were here for the Georgia-Tennessee game, it was kind of the game that ended Butch Jones' career and really kicked off Kirby Smart's career. It was a total beatdown for Georgia on Tennessee, and I don't think it will be as bad of a beatdown, but I think Georgia will clearly be the better team in this game. Obviously, I'm a huge believer in Tennessee, but I don't think Georgia's going to let Tennessee sneak up on them and pull off the upset. Georgia's going to win 38-13. It just comes down to Kirby Smart's had more time than Jeremy Pruitt to get it done. I think Kirby's a little bit better than Jeremy Pruitt, They're both kind of similar coaches, but whenever you compare this will be Kirby's 4th year and Jeremy's 2nd, so he's barely even had any time to catch up to Kirby Smart, and I don't think he's anywhere near Kirby Smart. That's not a knock on Jeremy Pruitt. That is a praise of Kirby Smart. So Georgia starts off the year 5-0. So this is a very, very possible upset for Georgia. South Carolina knows that they have a difficult schedule, so they might need to look at this game as kind of their Super Bowl. If they can beat Georgia, they'll have a successful year. Is kind of the motive of South Carolina. Well, as Georgia, they're coming off of 2 big wins against Notre Dame and Tennessee, all the momentum in the world. Of course, they have Florida coming up. They have Kentucky the week after. So South Carolina is going to kind of be the last thing on their minds, and I think South Carolina will actually be winning a majority of this game, and then Georgia will just kind of run away in the 4th quarter, winning 35-20, an ugly game for Georgia, but nevertheless, Georgia is able to sneak out of Athens with a win. So Georgia faces Kentucky. Last year, this game decided the winner of the SEC East. It had a bunch of implications on the SEC. Do I think this game will be as important as it was last year? No. But I do think it will have implications on the SEC, just because Kentucky, I think, will be good. Georgia, I think, will be great. That's why I'm going to give Georgia the 18-point win, 38-20 over Kentucky. I don't think Kentucky has the depth or the talent even to compete with Georgia. They have the coaching staff, I feel like, to compete and the energy to compete, but it just comes down to the roster. And I think Georgia just overall has the better roster than Kentucky. So I think Kentucky lost by about 18 last year. They're just not able to beat Georgia. Their ceiling's about 9-3. That's just all Kentucky's ever going to be, which is fine. I mean, they have basketball, and to be able to go 9-3, 8-4 every year is great for Kentucky, but they're just not equipped to beat a team like Georgia. So Georgia fans, please do not get mad at me. This is the game that's going to decide the SEC East, in my opinion. This is the biggest SEC game of the year, not only because of the rivalry, just because it has so much playoff and SEC implications. Georgia's coming into this game at 7-0. Florida's coming into this game 6-1. I think Georgia's going to be kind of hyped and egotistical. So I think the hype will outweigh the ego, and they'll come in this game giving it their best. But Florida's going to come in this game with a lot of swagger because the trash talk of Dan Mullen. I think this game is going to go back and forth. It's going to be one of the best and most entertaining games of the year. It's going to be everything a great rivalry game has. You know, flags, stupid plays, miracle plays, great coaching, great play, just everything that makes a great game. Will this game have it? Yes. So Florida, I'm going to give them the 28-27 win just because I think they'll be a little bit more desperate than Georgia, as Florida hands Georgia their first loss of the season. So Georgia stays at home, or heads back home to face the Missouri Tigers. This is a very winnable game for Georgia and a very losable game for Georgia as well. It all comes down to how good of a motivator Kirby Smart is, and I think Kirby Smart is an exceptional motivator, and I think he will motivate this Georgia team to give Missouri their best effort, and I think they will. I don't think this will be a blowout by any means. I think this will be a back-and-forth affair. But in the end, Georgia has the better offense and the better defense and the better team overall. So I think they'll win 49-31, an extremely entertaining game as they bounce back well after the brutal loss against Florida. So Georgia has their first kind of pure road game in quite a while, actually. This is a very interesting game because Georgia hasn't had much success in Auburn, Alabama. For quite a while. I think they're 1-2 their last 3 times they've been there. Auburn has kind of had their way with Georgia. If it's at home, Georgia at home against Auburn is much better than Georgia on the road against Auburn. Do I think Auburn has what it takes to beat Georgia this year? No. I think Georgia understands the implications and the rivalry of this game. This is Deep South's oldest rivalry. So I think Georgia's going to come in this game giving Auburn their best, and I don't think Auburn will be able to handle it. I think maybe in 1 or 2 years Auburn will be able to compete with Georgia on a more realistic level, but for right now, even though they're at home and Georgia doesn't have the greatest track record against Auburn when they're on the road, I still think Georgia gets the 34-20 win, heading 9-1 on the year. So Georgia heads back to Athens in what usually is a cupcake week. They actually have one of the most difficult games of the year against Texas A&M. I feel like both Texas A&M and Georgia won't have their full attention on this game. It'll come down to who's the better motivator. And also, I think LSU for Texas A&M is bigger than Georgia Tech for Georgia. So So Georgia will be able to focus 100% of its energy on this game, while Texas A&M I don't think will be able to focus 100% energy on this game. So I think Georgia gets kind of just an average A&M, while A&M gets an elite Georgia team. So that's why I'm going to give Georgia the 31-17 victory as they catch Texas A&M distracted. So Georgia ends off the year on the road against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech just can't compete with Georgia. It's simple as that. Georgia gets whatever. Kirby Smart gets to recruit way better than Georgia Tech. They just have so many different opportunities. The state of Georgia is invested in Georgia, not Georgia Tech, unless you're in Atlanta. But if you're in any other part of Georgia, there's more Georgia fans than there are Georgia Tech fans. The Georgia program is more invested, while Georgia Tech is more invested in building Lego robots than they are playing football. That's not a dig. That was a joke. That was a joke. Georgia Tech fans, please do not spam the dislike button. That was a joke. But again, Georgia's just going to win 38-10. There's no way Georgia Tech's going to beat Georgia, especially in the heat of their rebuild. So Georgia ends off the year 11-1, another successful year for the Bulldogs. I don't think that they're going to win the East. I think Florida wins the East and Georgia comes in second. But I do, however, think they will be able to sneak Georgia into the playoffs, possibly at a number 4 spot, potentially. It depends. If Texas A&M wins the West, I don't think Georgia does. But if Alabama wins the West, I think Georgia sneaks in. So it all kind of comes down to the Bama Texas A&M game, which is weird. The reason I think Texas A&M, if they win the West, Georgia doesn't really have a shot, because I think Florida will beat A&M if that happens. Florida gets in the playoffs, and that'll come down to who's going to sneak in, Alabama or Georgia. Obviously, Bama. But if Bama wins, I think Bama beats Florida. They sneak in Georgia over Florida. I do think the A&M for right now will win the West, but obviously my opinion goes back and forth every day. I just did it that day and said that they were going to win the West for that day. Today, my opinion is a little bit different. I'm swaying back and forth on that. But Georgia, I do think, will make it to the playoffs, sneaking in at a number 4 spot, getting lucky. And I think that they will be able to take advantage of that 4 spot and maybe even win their first national title under Kirby Smart. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Keep an eye out for an Ole Miss schedule preview, the last schedule preview of the SEC coming out later on tonight. Have an amazing day, and peace.